Hello everyone, so my name is Veling Georgiev and today we will cover what is Microsoft Flow. Now, I'll just go to the next slide. Who I am, as I said, I'm Velin Georgiev. I'm a SharePoint developer with decent experience with SharePoint, and this is a webinar part of the SharePoint user group Bulgaria. So we have monthly events, and you can visit more regarding the events on that website here. Didn't you just mute yourself because we're seeing we can hear you breathing in the microphone.
Sorry guys, I mute myself.
Yeah. Now, what's the agenda for today? I'll try to briefly explain Microsoft Flow. So this is not a deep dive session. I'll cover the basics, and then we will do a comparison between the Microsoft Flow and the traditional SharePoint workflows. Maybe along with the demo here, I'll explain the connectors, the triggers, and the actions, and what's actually that. And then we'll go into a typical SharePoint workflow scenario where we approve list items. Then I'll touch on what's team flow and templates, and then we will be talking about limits and quotas. If we have some time, of course, we'll see what's the relation between Microsoft Flow and Logic Apps. Just a note, this is a SharePoint online talk. Actually, I have only one sentence related to on-prem. But yeah, I just put that as disclaimer here. So, what is Flow? I got that description directly from the frequently asked questions on the Microsoft Flow side. But it seems that for now, Flow is for line of business users to automate business tasks, processes across applications and services. If you're a developer or an IT pro, you should be aware that this might not be the right tool for you, and it's more for citizen integrators or power users for now, although the intention might change in the future because I see very powerful development features there. So this is the official website, and this is another website called Power Users. If you haven't been there, I'll just open that to show you what we have. We have 4 communities here. It's called Power BI, Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, and Microsoft Team, and these are all like stack for power users. And if you go here, you'll find questions and answers and loads of posts and topics. So that's a very good place to start with Flow as well, apart from the official website that we also have here. Let's go straight to the basics. So I'll show one scenario here where we have a scheduled reoccurrence, and once a day we just search for tweets with this hashtag Office365 and we save those to a document library. I know that this is not a typical SharePoint business scenario, but for the basics I just wanted to show you that we have SharePoint, but we have integration with additional software as a service vendors. So let me go to my website. Here we have a tenant. How I remove that one? Okay. We have a tenant. This is a traditional tenant with a bunch of document libraries and lists that I've just created. It's a developer tenant. So I'll go from here and I'll say create a new flow. So I should be able to search for tweets and then save this into a document library. I'll use the shared documents library to save these tweets. We have that button here. We have the same button in the list view, but we also have the same button here if the flow is enabled on a tenant level. So no matter if you go from here or from here, you get the same experience. I'll just say create a new flow. Maybe a slightly different experience because I don't see this panel on the right if I go from here. Well, let's go from here, create a new flow. So I have two templates, predefined templates, but I would not use those. I would just say see more templates. And actually now we are on the flow website. As you can see, I was redirected from Flow 1 SharePoint, that's my website, to the Flow platform. So it is not hosted within the tenants. That's the first difference that you can see here. Then we have predefined templates, but I'll go blank just to show you what we have there. I'll say create a flow from blank. Now, that's the flow designer. And that's the very first step that we have to create. And the very first step is called trigger. So trigger is something that will start the flow and will trigger something, whether it's something on a scheduled base, recurrence event, whether it's something within SharePoint or something within Twitter. Or you can even trigger your flow from an HTTP request. You get an endpoint from here and you can hit the endpoint and trigger that flow. But I'll go with schedule. So I'll say, and as you can see, we have a card here with options. At the moment, I have only one option and I'll select recurrence, but depends on what you select previously. You can have multiple options to pick from. Here I'll say once a day. So just once a day, execute that flow once a day, and then add a new step. And the next step for my flow would be search for tweets with hashtag Office365. So I'll say new step. You can collapse and expand and collapse these cards. My next step is action. So that's the trigger, that's the action, and I have to perform action based on whatever I'd like to see here. I'll go with Twitter. And if I pick Twitter, you see that I have a bunch of options that I can pick from, but I'll say search tweets. And again, depending on your choice, you have a different card with different form here. Now I'll search for that text. So now this advisor wizard thingy says that I'm ready because I have one trigger, one action, and that's enough to create a flow. But I need to put one additional step, that's save the tweets to a document library. So my next step will be another action related to SharePoint. And if I select SharePoint, I'm getting all the available actions here. But I'm interested in creating files within a document library. So I'll just create a file. Now, we'll have more details and more fields to fill in here based on the action, the SharePoint action that I've just selected. And if I use the drop down, it will try to discover my site. And it already knows about my site. If you don't see your website here, you can say enter custom value and paste the URL. It will also work. Now, because I've completed that, this has a scaffolding mechanism. It knows the site, and if I select that folder icon here, it will try to list all my available folders. So as you can see, I can even see the catalogs folder and save it there. I don't know if I can save it there, but for the purpose of the demo, I'll use shared documents. Now, file name. If I click here, you can see on the right that we have some helper information or helper options. Because Flow knows from the previous actions or triggers that we have data incoming, and because of that action here, search for tweets. Flow knows that we have a tweet object that we can work with here in the next action. So I can say the name of my file will be the name of the user. Why not? .txt. And the content of the file will be the tweet itself. And I guess that should be enough for us to see the very first demo. As you can see here, Flow automatically added additional step for me, and that step is called loop, because if I go here, I have to select show advanced options, and every card has advanced options, and it's different depending on the card here. But here it says we'll retrieve maximum of 5 tweets. And that thing here knows that we'll retrieve to 20 results. I'll put it like 5, but still knows that I'll have 5 tweets, and it will iterate over each automatically and save those into the document library. So let's just create it. Yeah. And run it to see what's going to happen. Good. And because it's a reoccurrence event, it will run the first time that I say create. I don't know why they did it that way, but once you have reoccurrence here, it will run the first time once you've created it. This is the history, and it shows that it's still running. And if I go here, it's now completed, but let me go back and refresh. Should say completed. Yeah, it succeeded. So that's the run history, and it says succeeded. And we can go here step by step and then see what it does. For example, on the recurrence event, we have once a day. That's not so interesting. But here on the tweets, we can kind of debug it or troubleshoot it. That's the actual input, and that's the output. And you can see a bunch of JSON here from a tweet connector request. I'll go to the connectors in a minute. And the same applies here for that card here. We have outputs, and we have more nicely formatted fields here, but basically that's a JSON that comes from a request. And we can iterate over the items to see the request for every item. Okay. Let's go to the document library and see what's there. I'll just reload, and hopefully we'll see the tweets here, the name of the tweet authors, and the text inside. So the basic demo worked. A few more things here we have edit flow. This will open the flow designer again. We can disable and enable from here. We have more actions here. We can, because this is a reoccurrence flow, we can say run now and then test it whatever we need. So we don't need to wait this to be executed once a day. We can directly run it from here. We can save it as a new flow, so it will be an exact clone of that. We can delete it, of course. We can share it or submit it as template, so it appears down below for your organization. The share button and the see all button and the owners button, for now they all go at the very same place here. Probably they will differ in the future, but at the moment this is the panel that we open when we say share or owners. And from that panel we can add additional owners to our flow. For example, if you're planning a vacation and someone else needs to execute that flow for some reason, you can add it here as owner, and that flow is a shared flow already. That's important, and that's where the flow becomes a team flow. Yeah, that's for that panel. I'll go to the designer quickly and show you a few more stuff there. We have 3 dots here, icon with 3 dots here. And we can take a look at the options here. We have settings, add comments, not that important. We can just add something or just rename the whole card to be something more meaningful for you. The settings are different per action, so here you can have a different forms of different settings. Now the important part, or the fun part, is here where you can add another connection. Now this tweet action is executed from the context of the user, and pretty much everything within flow is executed within the context of the user. As you can see, I'm logged in with my Office 365 account here. I'm logged in with my Twitter account here. And if I would like to swap this and use another account, I have to add another connection, do the OAuth here, authenticate with another account, and this will be saved. Then I can swap between the accounts. I can use a different account here. There will be another option here to swap the accounts. Now, we can add more actions in between the actions. On a new step, we can, apart from the actions, we can add conditions. In the second demo, we'll see a condition. Then we can also add loops. This is a loop, this is a loop, this is a loop, and the scope is like running in a different scope, bunch of actions in a different scope. You can just encapsulate those in a scope. I'm not very familiar with the scope, so I'll not cover this into that demo. Good. Now, all those shiny icons that we're seeing, they're called connectors. And underneath, they're just web services with Swagger as a document mechanism, so the flow can discover those. These connectors are there available, and we can reuse them in flow. So that's maybe one of the huge differences between SharePoint and Flow. Flow is not SharePoint only, and you can interact and pull data from Dynamics, for example, into SharePoint and connect all those vendors and systems. I've pretty much covered triggers, actions, but not conditions, but I'll go into the conditions into the next demo. So let's quickly go through the comparison between Flow and the SharePoint workflows. As a SharePoint, everybody asks himself whether Flow is the same, and there are some differences here that I'd like to highlight. First of all, every flow is more on the individual or personal level for use. Previously, we used SharePoint for a SharePoint workflow for enterprise solutions, and typically SharePoint workflow goes along with SharePoint, and that's it. Now, the target is individual or personal use. You can use Flow without SharePoint at all. You can just hit that Flow Microsoft.com URL and use Flow for whatever reason you like. Just for tweeting or combining tweets with Facebook or stuff like that. So another difference is that Flow is executed in the context of the user. With the traditional workflows, we have lists and site executions, but now this thing requires you to be authenticated. And it's in the context of the user. Another difference is the scope is software as a service. That includes SharePoint and Office 365 services and products, but also can include Twitter, Dropbox, whatever. Previously, we have SharePoint scope more or less. You can correct me if I'm not right, but although we have a workflow server, we use that workflow server with SharePoint on the on-premise even. We don't use it for whatever reason we have, let's say, Dynamics. Then we have user can create flow with read access to a list. So previously, someone with a designer rights could possibly create a workflow. Now everyone can automate his work at some level, even with read access. So if you land on your site, and if you have read access, you still will be able to see that flow button here. Then, yeah, can be triggered from outside of SharePoint. You can even have an endpoint and hit that endpoint and trigger the flow, and the flow will start. In the SharePoint scenario, SharePoint workflow scenario, we have to trigger it from inside the SharePoint and start it from there. Now, not deployed within SharePoint. Let me open that URL. And here, more or less deployed with SharePoint or to be used with SharePoint. Now, here, flow is a separate product. And whenever you create a flow, it creates the flow in the nearest region that you're in. For example, if you're in Bulgaria, your flow will be created in one of the data centers or in the Europe data center. I think it's only one data center in Europe. That's important difference. So this is hosted in a Microsoft data center. It's not, I'm not sure if this is even part of the Office 365, but just hosted in a data center. And that's important. And if you're using, there is a disclaimer here, if you're using the Azure Germany cloud, for example, you might not see the flow because it's not available there. So it's not, the flow is not available for the private clouds. Okay. Now let's go to the second demo. And this is a typical approval workflow scenario. We have a vacation request. This will be a SharePoint list. And I have to create a vacation request, and somebody needs to approve that request, and I'll get a notification. Typical approval workflow scenario. Let's see how this goes. I'll go to my site and I'll show you my list. The list is called vacation requests. I already created a bunch, but here if I say new request, I'll see the start date, the end date, notes, approver. For now, the approver is just picker. And that's pretty much it. But I'd like to create a flow that triggers when a new item is created. So I can go from here again and say create a flow. I have more templates on the list than for the document library, but I don't see mine. I'll create that one from a predefined template, but I need to find it. Now on the templates gallery, you have templates and you can filter here. If you say Twitter here, you get different set of templates. But I'm interested in starting approval when new item is added in that one. I'll just click on that. So if you're creating a flow from template, it will show for you the connections that is going to include within that template. That means that the template will use my Outlook account, it will use my SharePoint account, and for the approval step we don't require accounts. I'll just say continue. Now, the trigger is here, all the actions are here, predefined, and we can just fill in the additional required information. I don't have site, so I have to specify site again. And that's my dev tenant. Now for the list name, as you can see, the options are already here, and I can specify vacation request for my list. Now, because whenever we create new item in a document, in a list, this output will come from the trigger into the next action. So I have all the available fields within my list here as a shortcuts, and I can use those to specify additional information for that action. And I can say that's my start approval step, and I can say assign it to the approver email. I have such a field in my list here, approver. It's a people picker, so I'll assign that approval step to whoever is specified here. Now, link to the item. We can pick that from here. It's predefined, but we can use whatever we'd like, because you can specify text and more than one field here. You can say hi, please here, and I can say requester. The requester is the created by email. That's the system created by field, and I can also say from date, start date to end date. And the same applies here. I can specify more text if I'd like, but I'll keep it like this for now. So, as you can see, I have all the list item information available here. Not all, but whatever is available there, because we don't, the flow doesn't support some of the fields like choice field, or there are few. I cannot remember at the moment, but I've stated there somewhere. But let's go to the next step. Now we have condition. If this step, in this step someone approves that, then we have if else. In the if scenario, we'll send another Outlook email, and these steps are all predefined. If I click edit, I'll open these steps and see what's here. Send email to the creator of the list item with the title, and see that comes from the start approval action. So that's the output, whether to be approved or rejected. The same applies here, but we have the rejected scenario, so no surprises. I'd like to add one additional step here and update the status of the list item as well. I have this vacation status field, and I'd like to, whenever someone approves or rejects, to just put one value here, so the list item is updated as well. So apart from the predefined template, I'll just add one additional action here, and I'll say new SharePoint action, update list item. Again, I have to specify the name and the list. And now it requires an ID. I already have the ID. That comes from the trigger. And I like to keep the title the same. And the start date the same. And the end date the same. The same applies for notes, but here I'll say approved. So whenever a new item is created, and it will have all these, it would have all these values, but I like to just update it and add my approved in that field. Good, that should be enough. I can add the same step here, but I prefer to save time and say rejected, so it's pretty much the same. I'll just create that flow, and I already have flow with that name. Let's rename it, and let's call it approval. Okay. Okay, and now my flow is created. No history here, but I'll try to add new item. So I'll say new vacation request from 27th to 29th. Paid leave. And the approver is me again. Let's save that item. Now this should trigger the flow, and if I refresh here at some time, I will see this flow running. It's not something that it should happen pretty much. It should happen quickly enough to see it. But while we're waiting, we can go into the slides. So what is flow ideal for? It's ideal for no-cost automation scenarios, and this is my personal opinion. If you cannot invest in Azure, for example, and use some Azure service there, and if you'd like to just do something at no cost, you can do it for automation scenarios, but simple one. Also for no-cost SaaS integration scenarios. In the past, the developers had to do that. Developers had to do the authentication, the handshaking, all the OAuth stuff around connecting both two services and communication between the web services in between. So that gives you a quick shortcut to automate something, integrate something, and don't involve developers or pay for developers. For no-code scenarios, if you're a power user, you know your requirements, but you don't know how to write code, you can just use the designer, the flow designer, and then create a workflow, and it would work for you. So I would say it's a very good tool, and I would use it in many of the scenarios. I already covered the templates and the team flows. Let's go back to my flow and see what happens here. Okay, still no ones. Let me try to see if I specified everything. Application request, new item is created, yeah. Start approval, that's fine. I guess we just have to wait a bit. If this doesn't work, I guess I already have one prepared there. But let's give this guy a few minutes. I'll just create another. So we'll have 2 executions, hopefully. I'll say something like that. So another request for me. Save. Okay. Okay, there you go. So we have a running one. I don't know what happened previous time. Probably we will see both here at some time. Let me see if this is the item that I've just created. So we can debug it. And we can see that the item that I've just created, because I've just put the df here for notes. I don't know why it didn't work with the previous one. But with that one, we have a success, and it's still running because awaits approval. As you can see, we've completed step 1, the trigger, but we're waiting here someone to approve it. How we use the approval scenarios? If you go to your flow, you have a tab on top here that calls approvals. And if you click the approvals, you'll see all the available approvals assigned to you from multiple lists and from multiple document libraries, no matter the location. So you'll get these nice cards with the approvals and additional information here. But you also receive an email. If I go to my Outlook account, my mail, I'll receive that email. So I'll be also available to approve from here. I just approved that one to see how it will proceed. What I wanted to show you is we have the approval and we have that debugging history panel here. And when I say approval and I confirm that, hopefully we will see a real-time update on that. So that's still running, but at some point the workflow completed. So as you can see, we can have a real-time support in here. And again, for a SharePoint developer, we have some valuable information here. You can see that this is internal field name. And hopefully we set up these to approved in our list, because that was the action from that update item. I'll go to my list and I'll just refresh the screen to see whether I was able to approve that field here from the flow. So let's refresh, and yeah, that's approved. So that was the second demo. Once this is approved, I should also receive an email that says, because I'm the approver, I'll receive that Microsoft Flow, please approve. But I'm also the requester, so I'll receive a feedback here that says, your request has been approved by Veling Georgiev. So everything works just perfect. That's my second demo. Now, one thing to note here, approval with multiple users is not supported at the moment. You can do some hacks and workarounds and make it work, but I would recommend to just wait they implement it. So this is part of the Flow user voice, and it's already started. So approval with multiple users will be there soon. Now let's talk a bit more on the policies, limits, and quotas. If you're a tenant admin, Office 365 tenant admin, you get a additional section in the admin center that's called Flow. So it's admin center Flow, and they're adding more and more features here. You can apply a data policy now. So you can hit the plus button from here, and for your organization or some environments of the tenant. I don't know how this works. For now, I will apply for all the environment. I don't know what apply to only selected environment means. If someone is interested, I can further research and then give you feedbacks on that. But you can say continue, and we see all the available flow connectors, SAS connectors. But for example, our company doesn't use Dropbox, and we don't want to allow the users uploading data to Dropbox for whatever reason. We can apply a new policy. We can say use only SharePoint, Outlook, and what else? That should be enough. And set this as a default group and save it. So this will restrict the flow triggers and actions to only the selected connectors. And this policy will apply after some time. It's not an immediate change. That's what I know on the policy side. But even then, you cannot restrict to your tenant only. Within that policy, you just allow SharePoint, but that doesn't mean your tenant only. Just as a hint here. Now, I have no idea what data integration is because this was not here a few days ago. So we'll just keep that, but you have user licenses here where you can download the list of the available licenses. You have quotas, and that shows the runs, and a tenant, Office 365 tenant, has 50,000 flow runs per month, and you can buy additional if you'd like. And you can see the capacity here. And every user can run 2,000 per month, 2,000 of the flows. That brings me to the next point, quotas, one of the next points. If you open the quotas from the presentation that I'm going to provide you, every user has 2,000 runs per month, but the user himself can buy additional runs and can run more. So that's up to the user. On the tenant side, the tenant, you can purchase with the tenant more additional runs as well. So it's for $40 per 50,000 runs. And there are some specifics here. I'm not going to go into details here. So have a look at those quotas if you're interested. Limits. We have limits, so not that interesting. Message size could be 100 megabytes, for example. Probably we would not get more than 100 bytes unless we transfer really big file as an HTTP request. But there are some limits, and then you should be aware of that. For example, that's an interesting one. If you do a for each action from the flow designer, you can run up to 5,000 iterations. So we still have thresholds, and then we have to consider those when we build our flow. But again, I've put the link into the presentation, and you can go there and have a look. At the moment, we cannot import-export flow. And this is, again, part of the user voice. It's one of the desired features, because if you use two different tenants for dev and prod, for example, now you cannot easily import-export flow. You have to recreate it by hand or do some JavaScript tricks to pull the definitions from there and import them. But it's already started. Not all SharePoint list fields are supported. choice, people, or group in some scenarios, you cannot get those. System feels like if you enable approvals on the list, for example, you will not get the system approve reject field neither. And as well, the governance of flow, there's some considerations. And if someone of you are working in a bank, you can contact me after so I can share with you some security scenarios. Even if we have time, I can cover one of those that are like we still have security implications with flow. Flow and Azure Logic Hubs share the same platform. For more advanced scenarios, you can use Azure Logic Hubs, and I'll just open one Azure Logic Hub to show you how this looks. That's my Azure portal, and this is a Logic Hub. If I go to the Logic Hub, and if I say edit, you see the very same designer and trigger action and everything here, pretty much the same like the flow. So Logic Hubs are something that run within Azure, but shares the same functionality and shares the same platform underneath. You have a bit more options here because you can go into a code view and you see this is called a definition language here, and you can see all your triggers and actions in a JSON definition schema way. But sometimes this is handy, and you can reuse even those into a flow. For example, you can copy that, go to your flow, paste it instead of where I have one flow just to quickly show you. That one. Edit. Just paste it somewhere and it will work. Something like that. And it should work. Even here, if we go into advanced mode, you can see some of the definition language. So if you really need some kind of advanced scenarios and something that you cannot achieve with click and select and drag, you can go in insane mode and start reading based on that definition language. But yeah, here probably you have a few more connectors, few more options. They release the new stuff here in Logic Hubs first and then in Flow, but they share the same. Just to let you know that you can use even Logic Hub. And I think the Logic Hub can be exported and imported in a better way than the Flow at the moment. Yeah, I think that's pretty much. So we have 12 minutes for open discussion and then questions. And I can even show you one scenario on my side where we cannot use the flow at the pro tenant yet, and we've opened tickets to Microsoft, so they will possibly come up with a solution. But we can go with the questions first. I think, Dincho, you can just unmute everyone and we can go into an open discussion because we have 10 minutes.
Sure, I mean, I think everybody can unmute himself and ask a question. But let me just first start with one question. We discussed this in when we prepare yesterday, I think. But if we want to start a flow on a document, but by a manual action, I mean ribbon action or something like this, is this possible? I mean, to start the flow with button from SharePoint.
At the moment, we can do it, but with custom effort. If I go in Flow, Let me just close that window.
Because there is some button, but
yeah, the only button that we see here, if I create a new flow, let me just go back. And if I create a new flow and if I say button, will this appear? Yeah, we can trigger flow from power-ups and from a flow button. So your option is to create a power-up and trigger the flow from there. So in a document library, let's say documents, I don't see power-ups here, but on my first release tenant, I can see it. You can create power-up and possibly trigger it from there.
And you mentioned some custom logic, you mean, because also you mentioned we can trigger it with HTTP requests, so probably we can combine this JavaScript HTTP request and to start the flow.
Yes, that's the other option. If you select request response, you, at the end, when we save that, let me just add quickly another action. HTTP send HTTP request with method post to, let me quickly try to create one.
And while you are doing this, I'll just explain why I'm asking, because the triggers that we have out of the box look perfect and work perfect, but usually the users wants to do some work, and when they are ready with the file or with item, then to click send for approval, for example, and whether it's for something on a background to be executed. So this button start of the flow seems to be very important.
Yes, yes. I'll try to quickly build a solution. How it goes.
Oh, just mention a quick workaround. I don't know if you hear me. It's Dimitar.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, a quick workaround on this button thing would be just to add a column in that list which says send for approval, and you make it a yes or no column, and you configure your flows to run on each modification of the document, and only if the send for approval is set to yes, you can do something like that. So when the user saves the document, they then need to change the column to yes to trigger the workflow, the flow, sorry.
Perfect, yes. This is a good trick.
Yeah, another thing is what I'm trying to do here is an HTTP request. See, whenever you say HTTP request, you get that URL. And if you have a schema here, because this is a post URL, and you have some schema here, I think that I can execute it even without schema. You should be able to trigger your flow as well. Let me just try. Okay, I'm pretty. We've got 2002 accepted. That means that I was able to trigger it. But with that action dim2 here, you can use JavaScript to send your request, and this will fire the workflow as well. So let me just see whether I was able to do it. Yeah, failed. See, I was able to trigger it from an HTTP request as well. So this is another possible option to do it. But again, it's a custom effort because you need and as I can see, we might even have more work to do there. But you can do it from an HTTP request with JavaScript.
Perfect. But the Dimitar's approach seems to be more power user friendly, so
yeah.
Definitely we have approaches.
Yeah.
It's a third one.
Yeah. If no more questions, I can just show you the scenario where we cannot use flow, so you're aware of that. Now it's with the team flows. Let's say that you're a site collection admin and you create a flow and you have access to sensitive information, sensitive lists that no one else has access to. And your flow sends data from those security lists to another secure place or whatever. Let's say that that's the flow. but for whatever reason you decide to make that flow team flow, that means that other person that's not site collection admin has access to that flow, and he can redirect, because if we say that that's the trigger and the trigger pulls information from a sensitive list, but the site collection admin is authenticated at that step, the user with read access can pull that information, because just running the flow, because they both share the same flow, and send that data to a public space. So that's important. Be careful when you share flows. If you're person with site collection admin rights or a higher rights than to whoever you share the workflow with. That's important. At the moment we just disable that, and we said we cannot use flows because site collection can create the flow, and an employee where the flow is shared, which the flow is shared with, can redirect that information and leak information somewhere in Twitter, because we have a Twitter connector, for example. I don't know if I explained that good enough, but I hope that you got the idea.
Yeah, so you keep the flow to yourself and never go on vacation.
Yes, yes. I hope that they will come up with a smart solution in future, because we already created a request, Microsoft request about this, and then it's an ongoing process. I can even update you with the status of that, because we really want to use flow on the tenant, and we'll see how it goes. But because this is a new technology, a new product, they're updating it every day, every moment, adding more connectors here. For example, if you go here and create a new flow and try to pick up connector, next time you'll see much more connectors within the steps. So this is an ongoing process. And I'm very happy of that thing, because it saves loads of pains. And as Dimchu said, if you're looking for a node code, no cost solution, flow is a perfect fit.
Super.
Okay?
So we'll see how flow will evaluate in the next year probably, and then
do another
we'll
presentation.
Yes, yes. So I think we are 1 hour presentation. Do you have anything to show or to share, Velin? I think this is good. Yeah, perfect presentation. Thank you for this, and thank you for helping our group even outside of Bulgaria. We'll share the webinar in the site, and if somebody wants to ask you, he can contact you through your blog, I guess.
Yes. I'll put my details as well, so feel free to contact me. Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.